Most men spend years trying to figure out what women want, reading signals, adjusting strategies, performing versions of themselves that feel increasingly foreign. And the harder they try, the more confused the result becomes. Here is what nobody tells men plainly. The reason most of those efforts fail is not because women are complicated. It is because men are solving the wrong problem entirely. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what I am going to break down is not a list of tricks or tactics. It is the actual psychological and neurological mechanism behind how a woman genuinely falls in love, what her nervous system is scanning for before she even consciously decides she is interested, and why the men who understand this consistently build the kind of connections that last. That understanding is worth more than any advice you have ever been given about dating. Let us start with the most important thing to know. The one that almost no conversation about male and female attraction addresses honestly. A woman does not fall in love in a moment. She falls in love across a process. For most emotionally mature women, there is no switch that flips. There is no single encounter that produces instant, deep attachment. What she experiences instead is a gradual accumulation of information about how a man actually shows up, not how he presents himself in peak moments, but how he behaves in the ordinary ones. Her nervous system is running a continuous, largely unconscious assessment. And what it is assessing is not how impressive he is. It is how safe he is. Safety in this context does not mean comfortable or accommodating. This is the most misunderstood part of the entire equation. And getting it wrong will consistently produce the opposite result of what a man is trying to create. Safety, in the way a woman's nervous system reads it, is about behavioral consistency. It is about whether a man's actions match his words across time. When he says he will do something and he does it, trust accumulates. When he says he will do something and he does not, trust erodes. That erosion is not dramatic. It is quiet, but it is cumulative. And the moment her nervous system registers a pattern of inconsistency, something in her emotional availability begins to close. Even if she cannot fully articulate why. Here is the thing most men miss entirely. The consistency that matters is not just consistency with her. It is consistency in his own life. When a man has clear goals and follows through on them. When he has a direction he is actually moving toward rather than just talking about. When the things he says he values are reflected in how he actually spends his time. Her nervous system reads that as evidence of reliability at a structural level. She is not consciously evaluating his ambition. She is assessing whether the man in front of her is someone whose word has weight. Now let us talk about the chemistry behind why this works the way it does. The primary bonding hormone in female pair attachment is oxytocin. It is the chemical responsible for the feeling of deep trust, of wanting to be close, of emotional investment that moves beyond surface attraction. But oxytocin does not release on demand. It requires a specific condition to activate. The felt sense of emotional safety. If a woman does not feel genuinely safe in a man's presence, her oxytocin pathway stays suppressed. She may feel attraction. She may feel excitement. But she will not feel the kind of pull that leads to real commitment. The chemistry requires the foundation. Research confirms that neither young men nor young women currently feel safe showing genuine interest early in dating, which is locking millions of connections into a permanent early stage where depth never forms. The tragedy in that pattern is that the men who understand how female bonding actually works, and who create the conditions for it deliberately, are operating in an almost entirely uncontested space. Here is what she is actually observing in the first weeks of a connection. And this is the part most men never see, because they are too focused on how they are performing. She is watching his presence. Not his charm, not his humor, not the quality of his opening lines. His actual presence. Is he listening to understand, or is he listening to respond? Is he forming conclusions about what she needs before she has expressed them? Or is he genuinely tracking what she is saying? A woman can tell, with remarkable precision, whether a man is present or performing. And presence without performance is one of the rarest things she encounters. When she finds it, it registers at a level that outlasts any impression his confidence could make. She is also watching his emotional bandwidth. This does not mean she expects him to be emotionally expressive in the way she is. It means she is assessing whether he has the capacity to hold difficult feelings, hers and his own, without shutting down or deflecting. A man who becomes cold when conversations get real, or who immediately moves to fix rather than understand, is signaling that his emotional range is limited. And a woman cannot bond deeply with a man whose inner world she cannot access. She can admire him. She can be attracted to him. But she cannot fall. The fourth thing she is tracking is future compatibility, not in the sense of shared interests, but in the sense of whether he has a life that is actually being built. Does he have a direction? Is there a vision he is working toward? Does he take care of his own existence with the same attention he is directing toward her? When a man has these things, it produces a specific quality of safety in a woman's mind. The understanding that he is capable of leading his own life, which means she is not being asked to be his purpose. That distinction matters more than most men realize. Now here is the piece of this that men consistently get wrong, and it is responsible for more lost connections than anything else. Rushing the process kills it. A man who overcommunicates his feelings early, who overextends himself before reciprocity has been established, who tries to create intensity before the nervous system has had time to build genuine trust, will almost always produce the opposite of what he intends. The woman does not experience his intensity as devotion. She experiences it as pressure. And pressure on a nervous system that has not yet registered safety triggers withdrawal, not warmth. Data from Hinge's 2026 relationship report found that 48% of Gen Z men hold back from emotional intimacy because they do not want to appear too invested, while the same data shows 65% of those men genuinely want deeper conversations. The gap is not the problem. The pressure is. The correct posture in early connection is steady, present, and unhurried. A man with his own life, his own goals, his own clear sense of self, does not need to force a connection to accelerate. He simply shows up consistently, holds his ground without aggression, and allows the woman's nervous system to arrive at its own conclusions. When it does, and when those conclusions are positive, the bonding process completes on its own timeline. No engineering required. Here is the honest part that this entire conversation has been building toward. If a woman is pulling away from a man who is showing up consistently and behaving with integrity, that is not a problem he created, and it is not a problem he can solve. Some women carry attachment wounds that activate specifically when closeness becomes possible, where the very thing they want becomes the thing that triggers fear. That dynamic is hers to work through. And a man who tries to rescue her from it by escalating his efforts will find himself in a loop that has no exit. The man who understands female psychology clearly will make a clean distinction between a woman who is processing natural vulnerability and a woman whose patterns are rooted in deeper wounds that she has not yet taken responsibility for healing. One requires patience. The other requires discernment about whether this is a connection worth investing in at all. Research shows that Gen Z increasingly sees emotional self-awareness as a baseline expectation in early relationship formation, not a bonus. The men who operate from that same baseline, who have done enough internal work to be genuinely present rather than just strategically available, are the ones women bond with most deeply. The summary is this. A conscious woman does not fall in love with a man's performance. She falls in love with his consistency, his presence, his capacity to hold space without losing himself, and the quiet evidence that he is someone whose word can be trusted. Attraction may open the door, but it is the architecture of how a man actually shows up that determines whether she walks through it and decides to stay. If you are a man who has been trying harder and getting less, the answer is almost never more effort in the same direction. It is a shift in foundation. From performing for her approval to simply being someone whose inner life is solid enough that her approval was never the point to begin with. That shift changes everything. And it is the only shift that produces results that last.